Good afternoon. It is 1 o'clock. Welcome to our HubLive. I'm coming from you to you from the Smart Hub, as you can see from my virtual banner just behind me. And I'm joined today by a very, very special guest who is going to help us unravel and unpack the opportunities and challenges for people in business moving forward, kind of the world post-COVID and what that looks like. Thank you so much, Professor Lee Di Milla. Thank you so much for joining me. You are the Dean for the School of Business at Central Queensland University, and we were just talking before that the university, in fact, is just like a business. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. I mean, there's still the thinking in some people's minds that we have an endless money pit, that the government funds us for all our activities, but for the best part of 3 decades now, the government has continually reduced our funding through various mechanisms. So universities have to find their own income sources. I guess an ideal example of that is how we moved into the international student market. And I think Central Queensland University was one of the first movers to adopt that sort of strategy. Because coming in a regional area, it's reasonably obvious that your recruitment pool for students is quite limited. So moving business, or our business in part, into the capital cities was indeed for us as a way to ensure our own survival and growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no doubt that every university in Australia, almost like every business in Australia, has been impacted, probably globally, but let's just focus on Australia for now, has been impacted by COVID. What do you see as that impact? How has that impacted CQU and also the broader business community in your view?
Sure. Well, it shows you how interconnected the businesses are, because the impact on universities then has an impact on students' ability to pay rent, to buy food. So there's an impact right across our communities. Coming back to the impact on the university, well, in my school, for example, we've had a decrease of about 25% in student enrolments. International fees are somewhat higher than domestic fees. So therefore, the revenue coming into the school has dropped significantly. However, my expenses don't drop significantly. So right at the moment, we're in a process of re-engineering our own business to find the balance point between revenue and costs. The longer term outlook for our business is also quite grim in a sense, because we know that in the next 2 to 3 years, depending on which model you want to go with, the likelihood of international student intakes is quite limited. Because it's not a question of when COVID ends, the world will go to normal. The world won't be normal. We have a number of stresses. So let's look at them. One is, even if COVID were to vanish tomorrow, we need to wait till the economies in some of our host countries repairs itself. So as an example, there was a report, which I've not seen, so it's secondhand, that 120 million people were made unemployed in India in the last month. Now, India is one of our prime markets. So to the extent that these economies can start to repair themselves, that's the point which we can start now thinking about, building our business again around the idea of bringing international students. However, it's not only COVID. Well, it is and it isn't. What COVID's also done, though, is forced our competitors who weren't into online education into now pursuing online education in massive ways. So as an example, the University of Queensland closed for a week back in mid-March. And basically what they did in a week is throw all their resources into trying to turn some of their face-to-face content into an online format. So coming back to the impact on my business, there's no doubt there's more competition for online students. And when the big players enter the market with very deep pockets, then we also then have to find a way to uniquely differentiate ourselves from the University of Queensland or from Monash University. So at every stage, we're at risk from our own competitors and our markets shifting and changing.
Well, that's true for absolutely every business. And I'm so grateful that you've shared these challenges, because I know that a lot of people in our business community will be able to relate to what Central Queensland University is facing. So how do we prepare for how things are now, for increased competition? Yes, it's good and well to say, let's get our business community online, but online certainly a very crowded space, and everybody is vying for all the consumers' attention. How do you get the attention? How do you capture your market share? And how do you turn the challenges into an opportunity? How do you spot opportunities? What are your feelings and thoughts around those questions?
That's a massive number of questions. I'll do my best.
I'm sorry, I know.
I will go with the general tenor of the question. Look, I think whether it's my business or any other business, then I'm going to start with a very simple thing, which is the word innovate. Now, innovate, I like to think of innovation as a continuum from doing just a micro change to your processes. If you look at your own supply chain within your business and identify one way of doing it with one less step, that should translate to cost somewhere. And the bigger your business is, then the greater that cost is. I use that example of the continuum because a lot of people think innovation means to buy expensive equipment. So there's a big capital investment, but need not be. Innovation goes everywhere from micro improvement to your operational processes to that large capital investment. And sometimes the answers are going to sit in between. But in every step, I guess you've got to also think about all the possibilities or the adaptability of your business. I think in an earlier discussion, we talked about, digital disruption and what disruption does to your business. Well, in the same way that a competitor disrupts a business in Rockhampton, equally, digital disruption means that you can disrupt an economy called the Sunshine Coast with your goods and services. So it's being able to use the technology that we have to reach different markets. But again, we've got to think in terms of what differentiates ourselves. When everyone sells online education in my business, why would a customer or a student want to buy my online education? So is it because it's got better content, because it takes less time to consume that product in terms of its assessment strategy? Does it have some other added value that others aren't giving you? So online education, for example, could be one-dimensional. You receive a piece of paper and you fill it in, electronically perhaps. But at the other hand, there might be high-quality video that actually helps to illustrate the concepts. It might be that you're prepared to, pick up the phone and talk to someone. Because in this business, we tend to hide behind a screen and work with our customers by email. Well, I've actually found you get a lot better response when you pick up the phone and actually talk to someone. So you're actually showing your students that you're real and that you're genuine. And even though I may be a professor and some people think, I shouldn't be doing that, or I think every customer is important. And I never think that I'm too special to ring a student and solve a problem with them. So I think I've answered some of your question, but I started by talking about innovation as a continuum where we go from one to the other. I tried to talk a little bit about how to identify new markets. I guess in my business, it's about saying, how do I use technology to get a student? Now, this is for us, it's a global contest, isn't it? Digital disruption means I can have a student in Scotland. I currently have students in Scotland, but they can be anywhere. So why they come to me must be because I do something that a competitor doesn't do. And maybe that's that human impact. It could be the quality of my product. So it could be a whole range of things. So again, for the average business, what do you have and how do you do it better than your competitors? And how do you let the market know that you actually have these benefits over a competitor?
That's really awesome. So I think you nailed that question perfectly. So really, the answer to overcoming the problems, but also seeing the opportunity is all around innovation. And innovation can be anything from simply changing a process in your business, making it better, solving that problem in a more efficient manner, to the other side where you're actually launching a brand new product or service, or you are going after a brand new market and you are very clear on why you are different to your competitors. And really what you mentioned is there are dimensions that you can look at in your product and service around how long it takes, so time, It takes less time, it takes more time, it's delivered at a specific time during the day. Another dimension can be the design of it. It can be online, offline. Another dimension can be the human-to-human interaction. Is it virtual learning? It could be anything. If you're delivering information, it could be available virtually, or is it available just at a specific time? But is there something in the design of your product or service that you could link better to the problems that your customers are experiencing? And then there are other dimensions as well that you can play with to try and differentiate yourself in the market. Lee, is there a process that you follow to look at what your competitors are doing? How do you do competitor analysis?
Well, I guess there are a number of tools, but rather than go into
tools.
I guess the basic step though is do your market scan. What are your competitors doing? So in a sense, if I'm looking to create a new master's degree or bachelor degree, I start by seeing what my competitors are doing. But I don't stop there, because if you do that, you've benchmarked yourself to what they did, not what they're going to do. So I think there's always
That's key. That is so key. That is so fundamental. That's really great insight.
Well, yeah, let me underline that. A lot of people do benchmarking and stop there. But that means you assume your competitor isn't interested in moving forward. So in any document, that benchmark is history. So you've got to now predict where this is going to take us. So the benchmarking is one thing. The second step is to actually look at the, again, in my business, what are the future roles? What does the World Economic Forum start predicting about? What are the jobs of the future? So then you start thinking about, let's use accounting as an example. Accounting is a profession that's under great transformation right now.
Correct.
Because the transactional nature of accounting can be done anywhere. So if accounting has to survive, then you've got to move to the more data analytics end of accounting. How do you use the data? So right now, what good accounting firms should be doing perhaps is plugging into their customers' databases. So accountants actually are using a company's real data to understand their cost structure and being able to advise. So your accountant isn't someone you see once a month or every 6 months and say, here's my receipts. I'm being silly a bit by saying it's a transactional. Accountants have to now think in terms of how do they add value by actually using the client's data. So in our remake of a Bachelor of Accounting, we're looking more around the data analytics. But even if we're teaching our marketing students, again, it's about how do you use data, because using data drives decision-making. And hopefully decision-making is correct, and that drives your future income streams. So I started with benchmarking, and I'm moving to then using a bit of a crystal ball, which is not too silly. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith, but you've got to understand where your technology is changing. If we come back to innovation or even adaptability, in the current COVID crisis, some firms who move quickly are doing really, really well. So as an example, there was a manufacturer in Melbourne, I forget exactly what they did. They repurposed their business to actually make surgical masks. So rather than just, we make T-shirts now, we actually can make something else. So think about what you have, and has circumstances change, how do I quickly adapt to that? Someone wise once said to me, you can either have a business that sells what you think your market wants, or you have a business that sells what the market actually wants.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad way to think about it. You don't have to force what you want of the market. Sell what the market is actually asking of you as well.
That's very, very, very insightful indeed. I know when you're in a small business or in a micro business, sometimes this is true for medium enterprise as well. You have the opportunity to move quickly. When you're part of a large organization, and I'm guessing that the university is a little bit like that, the council is certainly a little bit like that too. When you're part of a larger organization, you have to seek more people's approval, and there are other bureaucratic processes that you have to follow, which slows the reaction down. But if you're in a small business, you can literally decide to change your website today, and you can have it changed by tomorrow. Exactly. And you should take advantage. That's a huge advantage above the corporate.
Agility
so you could capture, Yeah, so you could capture sectors in the market or opportunities in the market that huge corporations can't act on because they can't move quick enough, essentially. I just want to also link to a few key points that you made, Lee. You're really touching on and painting the picture of what's really important to think about. And a couple of key points that you said is, sell to the market what the market wants to buy, not what you want to sell. There is a huge distinction, and I think that's why a lot of people really struggle, especially in the early stages of business. Now, what if you don't know what the market wants to buy? Well, there are two really practical tips that I can share with you to try and understand what the market is looking for. The first is a website called trendhunter.com, trendhunter.com. And in trendhunter.com, you can literally explore what is trending in different industries. So you can go and have a look at what the trends are. And because you're online, you are not necessarily constrained by the geographical constraints of your market. So you can go and look at trendhunter.com, which will show you the trends of a specific market segment, but it won't be a geographic constrained market. So you can then market to that sector anywhere in the world. The other thing to do is to talk to your customers. Just ask them, what is the greatest challenge that you are facing, and design a solution. Don't ask them, what do you think you need to buy right now, or anything like that. Ask them, what is the greatest challenge that you are facing right now? For the university, an example would be asking international students, what is the greatest challenge that you face? And often we assume that we know the answer. So we assume that we know that they can't pay our fees, but that might not be true. I know at the Smart Hub, we try and do that all the time, asking our customers, what is the greatest challenge that you have right now? So that we can then innovate a solution and not pretend to know what they're thinking. Just as an example.
Yes, making assumptions sometimes is not really useful. A flip side of looking at this, though, is actually, growing your business or changing your business is look to the future. So if we use, say, things like the electric car as an example, now, will the electric car take over petrol cars in 10, 15, 20 years? One day it will. So if I were an investor in building service stations, I'd be very worried about that. However, what I might start doing is, how would I repurpose my service station to accommodate that? What do I do to attract drivers to actually stop on my premises, and while they're charging their cars, they also buy other goods and services that I have in my particular location? But you either prepare and try and predict some of the future, or you get swamped by it. Because that's ultimately what it comes down to. You either try and meet the challenges, or it overtakes you. I mean, you're well aware of those examples like Kodak, companies like that who didn't see a future for digital photos, even though they started the technology. But also, do you remember Philips Records?
Mm-hmm.
Back in the mid-90s, they got out of it because they could see the end of vinyl records due to the invention of CD technology. So in a sense, at its prime, people are saying, why are you moving out of that? I think Shell did this recently too. About 3 or 4 years ago, Shell started selling off a lot of its coal assets because Shell, I assume, did its business thinking and said, right, the future won't be in coal, so let's get out while the price is high. They're probably extremely glad they got out of coal at the time. So sometimes, the bigger players have to really think hard about what is changing, and then what do they need to do to prepare for that.
And do you have any insight or tips? If I'm a person in business, let's say in Rockhampton, and I'm trying to look to the future, and I don't quite know how to do that. I don't quite know how to predict what's coming. Do you have a framework or tools or models that you could share with us to help that thinking process? Maybe a couple of questions that we need to ask ourselves, maybe something to Google just to start seeing what the trends are, what the future might look like.
Well, I haven't prepared for that, so I don't have those things at the top of my mind. However, things like you've just said, that website that you referred your folks to, was it
Trendhunter.com?
Yeah. But there's any number of these things. But again, without trying to, sound like I'm a paid person, I'm speaking for Smart Hub, it is about joining communities of people to actually start thinking about these things. The other thing perhaps is to also think in terms of forming an alliance. Rather than every small business trying to reinvent itself, think about the synergies in terms of aligning with another business. Because your core skills or your core competency could be about doing X, but someone else is about doing Y. So why try and do X and Y? So sometimes, seeking alliances or some sort of relationship with other people helps to grow your business as well. There could be cross referrals, there could be all sorts of possibilities in actually finding a partner that may have similar goals.
That is so awesome. I love that idea. I'll tell a quick story that kind of links to what you've just mentioned. We have a business in our Turbo Traction Lab who is looking to export food. Actually, it's the world's first freeze-dried feta cheese. And she was telling us a little while ago that really she wants to set up her own factory to be able to freeze dry the goods. But to get funding to be able to do that, you need to have a co-contribution. And then we brainstormed ideas as to how she can raise capital to get the co-contribution. And really that idea of creating strategic alliances or joint ventures with other people in the same industry or with complementary skills, that was the answer for her. And then she can move her own business forward. And I think there was one word that kind of summarized what people in business really need to do, and that is take the lead. Don't wait for someone to give you permission. You should take the lead. You should go and see what the future looks like and then go and find partners to help you navigate that future. That's essentially a summary of what you just said. Yeah. Is that right?
Exactly. I mean, if I give you another example, we have a lot of real estate here and a lot of buildings that are no longer really used. There's no reason why a high school can't come and use some of our facilities.
Yeah.
So again, as a way of sort of saying that we try and think in different ways, I encourage us not to think in terms of high school and tertiary education. For me, I want to blur that distinction. One way for me to get more students into here is to actually get students here earlier studying. I mean, I've stolen the idea from sporting teams. I mean, sporting teams reach down into 12-year-olds and sign up contracts with them about playing sport with them when they become adults. There's no reason why I can't use that idea and apply it here. There's nothing special about the university campus. It's a series of buildings, and that building next to me, which is pretty much empty, I can't see why that can't be year 11 and year 12 for a school in the region. Because I'm thinking that way because high schools are fixed in terms of their land space. I've got plenty of land. So you don't need to spend money developing new infrastructure or stealing from your playground. You can actually come and use our facilities. Now, I say that very confidently, I'm not the Vice-Chancellor. But again, he would have no problem with the idea of actually thinking innovatively about how do I solve your problem that you need more space, and I got a problem here that means an unused building, but bringing your students to me now could mean that they stay with me. Because the choice of a university can be done in a number of ways. One, it could be about elitism. I'll only go to the University of Queensland because that's where my parents went to, blah, blah, blah. But usually, do I like you? Because if I like you, then I want to study with you.
Yeah.
Making these choices is also one at a motive level. If you like people, you actually want to do business with them.
So absolutely insightful. It's about like and trust. Do I like you and do I trust you?
Exactly. Yeah. Actually, trust is critical.
And we don't like and trust people we're not familiar with. We like and trust the people that we know. Hence why that's such a great idea to move students on campus while they're still in their schooling years. Yeah. That'll increase the like and trust. And we can think the same thing about our customers. How can you engage with a larger community prior to them doing a transaction with you, prior to them becoming your customer? How can you bring them into your community? How can you solve a problem for them, add value to them, and then with the intent of later doing business, like doing a transaction with the people in that community who would want to, who like and trust you?
Yeah.
That's so brilliant. What else have you got for us today, Lee? Not that that hasn't been enough. That is so good.
Yeah, I might have spent all my intellectual capital here now. But look, there's a number of ways to try and do this thing. But I think I also already talked about alliances, about trying to predict the future. But this doesn't happen because you sit in your office and you think about it. It's good to actually use spaces like yours at Smart Hub where people collectively come together to kick around those ideas. That future keeps changing, and industries that we think will be there in 5 years' time may be even bypassed. So my example about the, repurpose your service station to cater for electric cars, that might not even happen because the technology we develop in the next 5 years means you'll be able to drive further with that car. It means that you could just charge the car at home. But even there, what sort of technology do you need to create or build and then install in a house that would allow that charging to occur? I don't think it's going to be your 240 volt in the house.
No.
Again, it's if you monitor where these technologies are evolving, you start thinking in terms of what do I have that supplies that need? Because if I go back even to the vinyl records and CD, well, I guess 20 years ago, I thought CD would be the end of it. Now, of course, what do? We stream. So my son's nearly 20. He can't quite conceive of the technology I had because he just uses Spotify or Apple or one of those sorts of technologies. If you look at the history of sound, you've got, for many years, you had this vinyl. Then we went very quickly to a CD and we sort of bypassed the CD quickly. So the technology changes at such a rapid rate, it's hard to predict exactly where things are. However, if you get in the right communities, you start to understand these things a bit more. I guess once we did a seminar a few years ago and we had builders involved, but even for builders, you can build a home under a shed these days. And that gets away with the problem of, working outdoors and it rained or there's a cyclone or whatever. It won't take long for us to probably build housing now in factories, and they're pretty much assembled on site. I've seen examples of this where basically everything was constructed in Poland, and they brought the materials on a barge. Within 7 days, they built like a 3-4 story hotel because your bathrooms are prefab. You don't have to actually lay tiles one by one. They just install. Lend-Lease is doing this now, I think, in some of their residential towers. Bathrooms are just prefabbed and high standard. We're not talking vinyl. They're just installed. So if you're a tiler waiting around to sort of just do your individual jobs, those things will change. I'm not saying there's no need for tilers. I'm just saying that on large-scale construction sites, asking for a tradie to come will also move on.
Yeah. I think the only constant is change, right? Yeah. And our ability to navigate change and be comfortable and adaptable is certainly skills that are becoming far more important than they were in the past.
Indeed.
Yeah. It is always such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for helping us understand how to navigate the future, the difference, or how to look for problems and opportunities, how to reach new markets, how to think about innovation as a continuum. Your insights have been really, really valuable today, and we appreciate your time. Professor Lee Di Milla from Central Queensland University, the Dean of the School of Business. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us for HubLive.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We'll speak to you again soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.